His name was Nathan Sawyer, and he'd learned to live between wind maps and blank horizons. When the Arctic tour season collapsed and the bills piled up, an email surfaced in his inbox. Helix North is seeking a facilities coordinator in northwestern Greenland. On-site housing, high compensation, confidentiality required. Signed, Adrian Blackstone. The contract was strange: arrive alone, communicate only via weekly reports over a closed channel, do not leave the perimeter without orders. But the advance hit his account 15 minutes later, and Nathan bought a ticket to Pawtucket, the old Thule, then took a tracked vehicle across the white emptiness. Station Helios stood on the edge of a stone plateau where the glacier seemed to pour into the sea. Sensor masts, drills, containers beneath domes. It was all commanded by Colonel Reed Granger, a man with an icy smile and a voice louder than the generator. "Your tasks are simple, Mr. Sawyer," he said. "Drones, power, perimeter. If you don't have clearance for a question, you don't need the answer." The first days were survival drills: calibrate antennas, swap filters, refuel snowmobiles, file the reports. The nights were a giant silence in which you could hear the glacier breathe. On the third night the steady wind became a vibration. The ground beneath the station answered with a bass note. The beacon drones on the southern outflow all went offline at once, though the weather was perfect. Stubborn, Nathan went himself, leading a string of 3 machines through drifts to the faulted coordinates. There the snow had settled into a round sinkhole the size of a small house. From below came warm vapor and a soft, impossible light for Greenland. He fixed a rope, switched on the thermal camera, and went down first. Beneath an ice dome ran a gallery, not natural. Hexagonal walls, a surface smooth as stone melted and frozen again. Warmth breathed in the depths, steam rose from cracks in the bedrock, water ran along the ribs of the tunnel, and tiny living sparks shimmered in it, like plankton driven from the sea and adapted to the dark. At a junction the drones lay like shot birds, their compasses spun madly. He pulled off a glove and set his palm to the wall. The vibration was rhythmic, like breathing. And then 2 figures stepped out of the half-light. They were human-shaped, but too slender for the surface, with skin the color of ivory. Their clothing was woven of fibers that glinted like ice in the sun. The elder touched a hand to his chest and spoke a short word, Sela. Then a longer phrase with consonants like drumbeats. Nathan didn't understand a sound, yet the meaning was plain: stop. Do not fear. Come with me. He went. The city under the ice wasn't a city in the usual sense, more a mesh of chambers and shafts where warm vapor climbed from the earth and rained back down. Light came from colonies of microlife collected in combs. Transport was open capsules that skimmed above the floor on an invisible guide. The Silet lived by the pulse of this underground weather and hardly slept. They entered a state of shared stillness when the walls stopped vibrating. The first meeting with Reed was inevitable. The colonel appeared on the lower platform with guards and a dry smirk, like a landlord descending to his cellar. "Congratulations, Sawyer. We're first." His engineers hauled a resonator to the surface, a ring-shaped machine, like a pendulum without a weight. At its frequencies, navigation and comms died and the heat flow from the wells intensified. In short, the energy could be tapped. "You don't understand," Nathan told him in the colonel's office. "These aren't abandoned tunnels. They're a living organism of a society. They keep a balance, and the balance keeps the glacier. If we start pumping, Reed listened politely, but his eyes were on the window where drones wheeled in the gray sky. Our mission is to secure advantage. Morals can wait. The Silent spoke not so much with words as with meanings that settled into one's head like waves. We came long ago, explained the elder whom Nathan privately named Tin. We are not the first to go beneath the ice. This is a place where the wall is thin. We strengthened it and live beside what lies beyond. On the surface those who come every few dozens of winters always wish to take. And they always pay, with themselves, or with us. That evening Reed gave the order, dismantle the nodes, at depth, hook up the resonator, prepare transport. By morning the station hummed like an anthill, crates, gantries, mules, to the shafts. Nathan chose between silent loyalty and the thing that would burn every bridge to his own kind. He chose the latter. At night he went down alone. The Silent knew, in quiet their city heard footsteps like drum blows. They moved as two, Nathan and Tin, toward the central well where the resonator sang low and painful. We can dim its song, Tin said. But only for a little. Nathan cracked the cap on an emergency relief, cut the comm cable, and forced a manual overheat. The machine ran wild. From above came curses, then alarms, then silence. In the morning Reed looked at him as if shooting with his eyes. You realize, the colonel said, you've signed a death warrant. Not for yourself. For them. Now this isn't research, it's an extraction under evacuation. He pulled the big lever, and a black helicopter set down with colleagues whose last names sounded like code words. The bribe was simple, a white ticket home and a Swiss account, in exchange for the coordinates of every node. The Silent didn't bargain. Their answer was short, we are closing. That evening the glacier sang like metal in wind. Frost bloomed inside the walls. The passages began to tighten as if the ice remembered it was ice. There was more water, the steam grew hotter. Nathan understood, they could fold the city like paper and go deeper. But the tight lattice that held the thin partition would not live without them. He returned to the station and began packing the personal. On the table he laid his passport, wallet, watch. Where? Asked the station physician, a quiet woman named Aisha. Down, he said. They asked. He thought he was going to prison. In fact, to a roll. The agreement looked like a ridiculous diplomacy for an underground people, exchange routes for prospector teams in the far north, silent access to rare surface metals, an obligation to block any independent drilling within a 100-kilometer radius, and an envoy with the right to speak among humans. That envoy was Nathan. They housed him in a transitional chamber with a round lens window that poured warm light. Up above at Helios he was invisibly guarded by soft blocks, a neural scanner in a fur cap, the fading of any precise memories of the city structure, rare letters, home, filtered as if through slush. He saw Reed once a month, the colonel came to check neutrality. Their conversation always had two chords, balance and control. Time on the ice is long. In 6 months the station aged faster than the people, and the silent tunnels glowed more softly because somewhere below they were weaving a new partition, a layer separating it from them. One night Nathan heard a different sound, unlike the hum of wells. It was hungry. From beyond the partition came an echo call, low and formless. The blocks in his head snapped pain. Tin said, "We hurry because your world hears it too. And it always goes to sound." A week later Reed tried again to open the resonator. He came alone, without patches, and set a metal case on the table in the chamber. "Blackstone doesn't forgive failure. Give me the nodes, and I'll give you your life back." Nathan looked at the lens window. Warm mist was waking there. Life isn't something you get returned by someone else's hands. He pushed the case back. The last day at the station began with the siren. The northern slope cracked, the sensor spat numbers that looked like pupils. Nathan ran topside. He and Aisha hauled samples and server disks out of the hangar while the metal groaned and the roof breathed like a ribcage. On the parade ground Reed issued orders, slicing the air as if his voice could stop the ice. The helicopters lunged toward the shelf. Then the snow under the yard collapsed, soft as a blanket. Helio settled half a meter but held. The silent galleries pinched deeper, preserving the top. After that the world grew quieter. Helix North pulled the equipment and left the containers empty. The colonel was reassigned. He left like storms do, loudly, without traces. Aisha transferred to an archipelago. At least there the tea doesn't freeze halfway to your mouth. Nathan stayed on the border between two silences, above and below. His role became almost official, consultant for cultural interaction, the man who wrote reports in two tongues, human, and the one where meaning is felt by the temples. He told himself he'd chosen right. But each winter, when the long nights breathed right at the windows, a sound rose from the deep like the sound of falling snow, only endless. And he understood, the partition holds while someone holds it. One day Tin brought him a thin sheet, soft and warm, like the distance to spring. "Right," he said. "We ask it. Those above must learn without learning. Words should be like snow, lie quietly, but melt at the right moment." Nathan sat and began, not a report, a story. He named no names, swapped coordinates, changed Antarctica to Greenland, and real doors to invented ones. But he kept the core, the choice between greed and balance, the price of emptiness if it tears. His manuscript came out a year later as a novel. People read it by fireplaces, on commuter trains, and in barracks, and said, "A beautiful tale." Colonel Reed sent a short letter without a signature, "You're mistaken about my role." But we both did what we had to. Adrian Blackstone turned his attention to Chilean lithium. Helix North changed its logo. The city under the ice breathed. In the world above, budgets, governments, and equinoxes changed. Nathan learned to hear when a new note entered the silence, and he understood, the partition is not eternal, it must be rewoven again and again. And there was a strange hope in that, as long as someone sings under the ice, the world above hears more than wind. So ended a story he would never call true. But when easterly winds carried the thin hum from beneath the glacier, he would step onto the catwalk, lift his collar, and whisper, "Hold fast. We hold." Thumbs up if you believe raptors and wild rivers deserve protection, like, subscribe, and share. Bell turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story in this series. Disclaimer, this is a fictional narrative. No animals were harmed. We support legal, ethical hunting and conservation. Poaching is a crime.